Okay, so in this session, let's talk about extracurricular activities. So first, how important are your extracurricular activities? So let me introduce the term first of all. The gray area. So basically, most of you guys are in the gray areas, especially when the universities you apply to is among the top tier ones. Why? Because most of the applicants have very similar grades. So let's have a look at this profile on my slides. So this student graduates from a public high school in Vancouver, Canada, and have an average of a 95%, ranking among the top 3% in his grades. His SAT is about 1,580, and also he takes some AP courses, and all of which have very good grades. So what do you feel about this student? Some may say, wow, ranking among top 3% in a public high school and, got over 1,580 in SAT, that's pretty awesome. Well, he is doing awesome. But if you know that he's applying to colleges like University of Pennsylvania, Duke, and University of Chicago, then you would probably realize that he's just doing average. Or you could say he's just an average fish in a very crowded pond. To give you a better sense, the admission average in the University of Pennsylvania is about 96%, and the SAT average is over 1,560. So by that scale, he's just doing around the average among the applicants. So this is what happens to many of your profiles. So if you have learned stats, you must know the normal distribution, right? So let me show you some data. Here is a common data set of the University of Toronto, a top-ranking university in North America. And from this table, we can see that most of the admitted students have around 90% in science and business. And you can see the overall average of business and commerce students is around 92%, while only quite a few of them have an average over 95%. For example, you can see around 44% of students were admitted with an average ranging from 90% to 94%. And there's only 16% of students having an average over 95%. So this is a very typical normal distribution if you have learned statistics. Now, you must understand why most of you guys are in the gray area, right? As your grades will be highly similar. Therefore, it will be very hard to admission officers to distinguish you from another simply based on your grades. So this is where your actual curricular activities and essays will become vital. If you have very impressive extracurricular activities and stunning essays, then you will be pulled out of the gray area. So this is why I always emphasize the importance of doing extracurricular activities and writing great essays over your GPAs and SATs. There are so many students with great scores, but not so many interesting souls who spend their time out of their classes in a meaningful, impactful way. So the question is, how do admission officers evaluate the quality of your extracurricular activities? So here's the model I use to help my students evaluate their quality of extracurricular activities. As you can see, there are 4 parts, and I'll explain them one by one. So generally speaking, admission officers want to find students who spend their time in a meaningful way, and they want to find your uniqueness and personalities from reading through your activity sheet or activity list. So the first factor they would like to consider is your commitment to activities. One thing we really don't like to see on an activity list is that the students do a lot of things, yet none of them last very long. Instead, what we want to find is that you do something that lasts for a really, really long time. For example, you do a volunteer job in a senior center over the last 3 years, and this is something we would like to see. But you should also know that admission officers will always look for evidence. So that's why they always say that you should demonstrate your interests. But one thing you do have to know is there are in fact different levels of achievements. So what admission officers will do is to score your activities based on the level of your achievements. For example, if you are a great fan of writing and you practice writing for a really long time, but unfortunately due to many different reasons, maybe you're busy, maybe your workload is too heavy or something like that, there hasn't been any achievements. So the admission officers will give the minimum score to this activity. So in comparison, a student B is also a great fan of writing, but she has earned several awards on writing and also work as the social media coordinator and one of the editors for her high school newspaper. So clearly, having some achievement like these will get a higher score. Well, another thing you should know about achievements is that even if you earn some awards, admission officers will still score differently between awards of different levels, right? Well, that makes sense because it is certainly different between earning a school-wide award and a regional, national, or even a global award. But whatever level of achievements you have, the bottom line is that you should try to achieve something, big or small, since you have devoted so much time into something. Okay, moving on to the third important factor, which is leadership. And I believe this is not going to be quite new information for you, but I do want to let you know that it is not right to think that leadership is only required for business programs. It is valued no matter what programs you apply to. Also, some students and parents have the misunderstanding that if you take some leadership courses, then you have the leadership. Or you have to become a president of the student council to demonstrate your leadership. So those ideas are not correct. Leadership is a quality. So there are so many ways to demonstrate your leadership. So I just tell you one story about one of my students. So last year, one of my students saw many homeless when he walked in the downtown Vancouver, and he decided to do something to help them. Finally, he organized a soup kitchen sponsored by a local supermarket in downtown Vancouver and the Food Bank of Canada. So that activity served about over 200 homeless people and raised about over 2,000 Canadian dollars. And that student didn't belong to any of the clubs or student council at that moment, and he was admitted by UCLA, Rice College, Babson College, and University of New York at the end of that year. So remember, leadership is a quality. So instead of looking at your position, we will be more interested in the responsibilities and the impact you created. Another thing you need to remember is that teaching and sharing family responsibilities can also be seen as leadership. This is something many students and parents always ignore. Okay, so the last element for a great extracurricular activities is the uniqueness. One thing you need to know is that admission officers look at many profiles every year, and they for sure want to see something fresh, not really cliche. So if you simply fill in your activity sheet with things like summer volunteer, peer tutoring, volunteering in the senior center, summer schools, or something like that, your activities might be too much similar to other applicants' activities. I'm not saying that doing all those things is not good, but what I want to tell you is that remember, our goal here is to get out of degree areas and impress admission officers. So think about something you do that can be very unique from the majority, and that may become your X factor. So I'll share with you another story of my students. One of my students 2 years ago wanted to apply to environmental studies in Cornell. And when we're thinking about what to do to demonstrate his passion towards environmental protection, we came up with the idea of founding a club in the school with the name of Running and Protecting. So in the club, members would run together while picking up the garbage along the way. That idea has attracted many people to join in because it creates a social opportunity For students in his high school, running is a pretty healthy way of life. So every time they run in groups and compete with each group to see which group got the most garbage, at the same time, I suggested that students that they can make a poster and a video at the year end showing the amount of different types of garbage they've collected or picked up. And that experience has become a very unique experience for my students when we were working on the essays and the interviews. So finally, he was admitted by the Cornell. So remember these 4 factors when considering what kind of activities you want to engage in. Universities want to recruit students with good academics and interesting souls and personalities. Not simply the study machines can only get really high marks, so you need to show them your passion, talent, qualities, and uniqueness in your activity sheet. Okay, so that's pretty much for this video. Let's move on to the next video.